Captain Jake Morrison stared at the readings on his screen and shook his head. The energy signatures made no sense. His ship, the Federation vessel Starwind, had been patrolling the outer rim for 3 months without finding anything unusual. Now suddenly his sensors were picking up power readings that should not exist. "Danny, take us closer to those coordinates," Jake said to his pilot. Danny Ross was young but skilled, one of the best pilots in the Federation fleet. He guided the Starwind through the asteroid field with ease. "Captain, these readings are off the charts," said Kate Martinez from her engineering station. She had been working on Federation ships for 15 years and had never seen anything like this. "Whatever is generating this energy, it is more powerful than our main reactor." Jake walked over to where Dr. Lisa Campbell was studying her archaeological scanner. Lisa was the best xenoarchaeologist in the Federation, and she had requested this mission specifically. She believed there were ancient ruins in this sector that could change everything they knew about galactic history. "What do you think, Lisa?" Jake asked. "Could this be connected to your ancient civilization theory?" Lisa looked up from her scanner with excitement in her eyes. "Jake, I think we found something incredible. These energy readings match theoretical patterns I have been studying for years. There are stories about a warrior race that lived in this region long ago. Most scholars think they are just myths, but what if they are real?" Steve Blake, the communications officer, turned from his station. "Captain, I am picking up some kind of signal from the surface of that planetoid. It is very faint, but it seems to be repeating." Jake felt his heart beat faster. First contact with an unknown civilization was every captain's dream and worst nightmare. "Put it on speakers, Steve." The bridge filled with a strange rhythmic sound. It was clearly artificial, but unlike any language in the Federation database. Lisa gasped and ran to her computer. "I know this pattern," she said, typing rapidly. "It matches fragments I found in ruins on Kepler 7. Jake, this could be evidence of the humans." The other crew members looked confused. Everyone in the Federation had heard stories about humans, but they were considered children's tales. The stories spoke of a fierce warrior race that never surrendered, no matter how impossible the odds. They supposedly fought with honor and protected the weak, but they had vanished from the galaxy over 300 years ago. "Lisa, you cannot be serious," said Kate. "Humans are myths. Everyone knows that, are they?" Lisa asked. "Think about it. Every species in the galaxy has stories about humans. The Vorthak call them the stubborn ones who refuse to bow. The Zephyrians have legends about sky warriors who fought impossible battles. What if these stories are not myths but history?" Jake made a decision. "Danny, set us down on that planetoid. Full scan before we land. I want to know if there are any life signs." The Starwind descended through the thin atmosphere of the small world. The surface was rocky and barren, but their sensors detected structures beneath the ground. Danny found a flat area near what looked like the entrance to an underground complex. "Atmosphere is breathable," reported Kate. "Gravity is about 80% of Federation standard. Should be comfortable for all of us." Jake assembled a landing party. He took Lisa, Steve, and 2 security officers named Carl Hughes and Ben Hayes. They wore full environmental suits just to be safe, even though the air seemed clean. The entrance to the underground complex was clearly artificial. Smooth metal walls led down into darkness. Their lights revealed corridor after corridor of empty rooms. Everything was built for beings about the same size as Federation species, but the architecture was different. It felt more solid, more permanent. "Look at this," Lisa called from ahead. She was standing in front of a wall covered with symbols and pictures. "These are human characters." "I am sure of it," Jake studied the wall. The symbols were carved deep into the metal, as if whoever made them wanted them to last forever. Some of the pictures showed figures in what looked like military uniforms. Others showed ships that looked nothing like current Federation designs. "Can you read any of it?" Jake asked. Lisa traced the symbols with her finger. "Some of it. This word here means return, and this one means when needed. I think this entire wall is some kind of message or warning." They moved deeper into the complex. Every room they found was empty, but clearly designed for long-term habitation. There were sleeping quarters, meeting rooms, and what looked like command centers. Everything was clean and well-maintained, as if the inhabitants had just left. In the deepest part of the complex, they found the most important room. It was circular with a raised platform in the center. The walls were covered with star maps and tactical displays that still glowed with soft light. "These displays are still active," said Ben Hayes. one of the security officers. Someone or something is still powering this place. Steve was examining one of the control panels. Captain, I think I can access their computer system. The interface is different, but the basic principles seem familiar. Do it, Jake ordered. But be careful. We do not know what kind of security they might have. Steve worked for several minutes before the main display activated. Images began flowing across the screen. They showed battles between massive fleets, planets under siege, and warriors fighting against impossible odds. The technology in the images was far beyond anything the Federation possessed. My God, whispered Lisa. These are not myths. These are historical records. The final image made everyone on the landing party stop breathing. It showed a massive fleet of ships unlike anything they had ever seen, disappearing into what looked like a dimensional rift. The timestamp showed the image was recorded exactly 307 years ago. They left, said Jake quietly. But why? Lisa found the answer on another wall. The symbols were clearer here, and she could read most of them. They say here that they went beyond the rim to prepare. They were waiting for the galaxy to need them again. Carl Hughes, who had been quiet during the entire expedition, finally spoke. Captain, what if they are still out there? What if they are watching and waiting? Before Jake could answer, Steve's communicator crackled with an urgent message from the ship. Captain, you need to get back here immediately. We are receiving reports of massive Vorthak fleet movements on the outer rim. It looks like they are preparing for a major offensive. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. The Vorthak Empire had been threatening Federation space for months, but their military leaders had insisted they were not ready for a full-scale war. If the Vorthak were moving now, it could mean the end of Federation civilization. As they returned to the ship, Jake could not stop thinking about the message on the wall. The humans had said they would return when the galaxy needed them most. With the Vorthak Empire preparing for war, that time might be now. The question was, were the humans still out there, and would they really come back? Admiral Helen Torres stood in the command center of Federation Defense Headquarters and watched the reports flood in. Strange ships were appearing all across the outer rim, and none of them matched any known vessel design. The ships were sleek and black, almost invisible against the darkness of space. They appeared without warning, scanned Federation patrols, and vanished before anyone could respond. How many sightings do we have now? Helen asked her aide, Lieutenant Amy Watson. 47 confirmed contacts in the last week, Amy replied, checking her datapad. All ships are described as black, angular, and extremely fast. No two encounters have lasted more than 30 seconds. Helen frowned. The Federation was already stretched thin, watching the Vorthak Empire's movements on the eastern border. Now they had mysterious ships appearing from the western void. It felt like the galaxy was closing in on them from all sides. Commander Ben Hayes entered the command center with urgency in his step. Ben commanded the Federation's fastest response task force, specifically designed to investigate unknown contacts. He had been chasing these mystery ships for 3 days without success. Admiral, I need to speak with you privately, Ben said. Helen could see the frustration in his eyes. They moved to Helen's office, where Ben activated a privacy screen. Admiral, these ships are not just fast. They are using technology we do not understand. Yesterday, my entire squadron had one of them surrounded. It was outnumbered 12-1 with nowhere to run. What happened? Helen asked. It disappeared, Ben said simply. Not jumped to hyperspace, not cloaked. It just stopped existing in our reality for about 10 seconds, then reappeared behind us and vanished again. Helen felt cold fear creep up her spine. Are you saying these ships can phase through normal space? I am saying they can do things that should be impossible according to our understanding of physics, Ben replied. Admiral, whatever species is flying these ships, their technology is centuries ahead of ours. Before Helen could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the headquarters. Amy Watson's voice came over the intercom. Admiral Torres to the command center immediately. Priority 1 contact. Helen and Ben rushed back to find the main display showing a single black ship hanging motionless in space directly above the Federation capital world. It had appeared without any sensor detection, right in the middle of the most heavily defended system in Federation space. How did it get past our defenses? Helen demanded. It did not get past them, said Captain Roy Parker, the defense coordinator. It just appeared. 1 second empty space, the next second that ship was there. The mysterious vessel was beautiful in a deadly way. Its hull seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, and its design was unlike anything in Federation records. It looked organic yet mechanical, as if it had been grown rather than built. "Any communication attempts?" Helen asked. "We have been trying every frequency for 10 minutes, said Steve Blake, who had been reassigned from the Starwind to headquarters after Jake Morrison's discovery. No response to any standard greetings. Helen made a decision that would change everything. "Open a channel. All frequencies, maximum power." She stepped forward to address the unknown ship. "Unknown vessel. This is Admiral Helen Torres of the Federation Defense Force. You are in violation of Federation space. Identify yourself immediately." For several seconds, nothing happened. Then the main screen flickered and a face appeared. The being looking back at them was clearly humanoid, but something about the features seemed familiar yet strange. The skin was pale, the eyes were a deep blue, and the hair was dark brown. Most shocking of all, the being looked exactly like the mythical humans from old stories. "Admiral Torres," the figure said in perfect Federation standard. "I am Captain Alex Turner of the Terran Reconnaissance Division. We need to talk." The command center fell silent. Everyone knew the word Terran from ancient texts. It was the old name for the human homeworld. But humans were supposed to be extinct, vanished centuries ago. "That is impossible," Helen said finally. "Humans are extinct," Alex Turner smiled sadly. "Reports of our extinction have been greatly exaggerated, Admiral. We have been watching your galaxy for a very long time. Recent events have convinced us that it is time to make contact." Helen's mind raced. If humans were real and possessed this level of technology, it changed everything about the current situation. "What recent events?" "The Vorthak Empire is preparing for total war," Alex said. "They plan to conquer every Federation world within 6 months. Your current military cannot stop them." "How do you know this?" Helen demanded. "Because we have been watching them too," Alex replied. "Admiral, may I come aboard your station? There are things we need to discuss that should not be transmitted over open channels." Helen looked around the command center. Every officer was staring at the screen in amazement. The discovery of living humans would be the biggest news in galactic history, but she needed to verify this was real before making any announcements. "Very well, Captain Turner. You have permission to dock. Bay 7. Thank you, Admiral. I will be there shortly." The screen went dark, and immediately everyone began talking at once. Helen raised her hand for silence. "Nobody speaks of this to anyone outside this room until I give permission. That is a direct order." 20 minutes later, Helen stood in docking Bay 7, watching the most advanced ship she had ever seen glide silently into the station. The craft was small, clearly designed for a single pilot, but it moved with impossible grace. It touched down without making a sound. The airlock opened and Captain Alex Turner stepped out. He was tall and lean, wearing a uniform that looked both military and civilian. The material seemed to shift color slightly as he moved, and his equipment was far more advanced than anything the Federation possessed. "Admiral Torres," Alex said, extending his hand in an ancient human greeting that Helen recognized from historical texts. "Thank you for agreeing to meet." Helen shook his hand, still unable to believe what was happening. "Captain Turner, I have to ask, are you really human?" "I am," Alex said. "My people have been hiding beyond the galactic rim for over 3 centuries. We left after the Great War nearly destroyed all civilized life. We needed time to heal, to grow stronger, and to prepare." "Prepare for what?" Alex's expression grew serious. "For the day we would need to return and protect the galaxy from threats it could not handle alone. Admiral, that day has come. The Vorthak Empire possesses weapons that could sterilize entire star systems. If they are not stopped, billions of innocent beings will die." Helen felt the weight of the moment settling on her shoulders. "What are you proposing?" "An alliance," Alex said simply. "Your knowledge of current galactic politics combined with our military capabilities. Together we can stop the Vorthak before they begin their conquest." As if summoned by his words, emergency alarms began sounding throughout the station. Amy Watson's voice echoed over the intercom. "Admiral Torres, urgent message from the Outer Rim. Vorthak forces have begun attacking Federation colonies. The war has started." The Vorthak invasion fleet was massive beyond anything the Federation had ever seen. War Commander Sorthak stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Bone Crusher, and watched as his dreadnoughts moved toward the Federation colony of New Hope. Each of his ships was the size of a small moon, bristling with weapons that could crack planets in half. "Status report," Sorthak hissed to his tactical officer. 12 dreadnoughts in position, War Commander. The Federation colony has only 3 defense stations and a handful of patrol ships. They will fall within the hour. Sorthak smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth. The Federation had grown soft during their years of peace. They would learn what true power meant when the Vorthak Empire swept across their worlds like a fire through dry grass. Light years away, Admiral Helen Torres watched the battle reports with growing horror. The Federation fleet had tried to stop the Vorthak advance, but their ships were being destroyed faster than they could be replaced. The enemy dreadnoughts shrugged off Federation weapons like they were toys. "We have lost contact with New Hope," reported Amy Watson. "The colony is gone, Admiral." 8 million civilians, Helen closed her eyes. In 3 days of fighting, the Federation had lost 6 colonies and half their outer rim fleet. At this rate, the Vorthak would reach the core worlds within a month. Captain Alex Turner stood beside her, studying the tactical display. Since his arrival, he had been sharing intelligence about Vorthak capabilities that proved frighteningly accurate. The humans had been watching both sides prepare for war. "Your ships are brave," Alex said quietly, "but they are fighting with weapons designed for peacekeeping, not total war. What choice do we have?" Helen asked. "This is everything we can field." "You have allies now," Alex replied. "Admiral, it is time for my people to reveal ourselves." On the bridge of the Bone Crusher, Sorthak was planning his next attack when his sensor officer made a report that made no sense. "War Commander, I am detecting a single ship approaching from the void. It does not match any Federation design." "Size and armament?" Sorthak asked. "Approximately 400 meters long. Weapons configuration unknown. It appears to be alone." Sorthak laughed, a sound like grinding stone. "One ship against my entire battle group? The Federation has truly lost their minds." The unknown vessel moved with fluid grace through the asteroid field where the Vorthak fleet was regrouping. It was sleek and black, almost invisible against the darkness of space. On its hull, barely visible markings read, TCS Valiant. Captain Nick Foster sat in the command chair of the Terran destroyer and studied his enemy. He had been fighting mock battles against Vorthak ship designs for decades, preparing for this moment. His crew of 35 humans had trained their entire lives for this war. "All stations report ready, Captain," said his tactical officer, Lieutenant Kelly Brooks. "Very good," Nick replied. "Begin the demonstration." The Valiant moved toward the Vorthak battle group at impossible speed. Sorthak watched in amazement as the small ship accelerated to velocities that should have torn it apart. Then it did something that made his blood run cold. The ship simply vanished from his sensors. "Where did it go?" Sorthak roared. "Unknown, War Commander. It just disappeared." The Valiant had not disappeared. It had shifted into dimensional space, a technology humans had perfected during their exile. From this parallel dimension, they could observe and target enemies who could not detect or harm them. Nick watched the Vorthak ships scrambling to find him and smiled grimly. "Target their command ship. Quantum torpedoes, full spread." The Valiant phased back into normal space directly behind the Bone Crusher. Before the Vorthak could react, 6 quantum torpedoes struck their flagship. The weapons passed through the ship's shields as if they did not exist and exploded inside the hull itself. Sorthak felt his massive ship shudder as explosions tore through multiple decks. "Damage report. Hull breaches on 15 levels. Primary weapons offline. How did they get through our shields?" Before Sorthak could answer, the unknown ship vanished again. This time it reappeared beside one of his heavy cruisers and unleashed a beam weapon that cut the enemy vessel in half like a knife through paper. Lieutenant Kelly Brooks had transferred from Federation service to the Terran fleet 2 years ago. She was one of the few non-humans serving on human ships, and she watched the battle with professional admiration. The Vorthak ships were powerful but slow and predictable. Human tactics were based on speed, precision, and the element of surprise. "Next target, Captain?" she asked. "Take out their weapons platforms first," Nick ordered. "Leave the troop ships for last. I want Sorthak to see his entire fleet destroyed before we finish him." The Valiant moved through the Vorthak formation like a ghost. It would appear, destroy a target, and vanish before the enemy could respond. The quantum torpedoes passed through shields and armor. The particle beams cut through the strongest hulls, and the ship's dimensional drive made it impossible to track or target. On the Bone Crusher, Sorthak watched his fleet die one ship at a time. His 12 dreadnoughts, which had seemed invincible an hour ago, were being systematically destroyed by a single enemy vessel. It was impossible, but it was happening. "War Commander, we must retreat," urged his tactical officer. "Retreat?" Sorthak snarled. "From one ship?" "That is not just one ship," said his sensor operator, fear clear in his voice. "War Commander, I'm detecting energy signatures that suggest this vessel possesses technology centuries beyond our own." Sorthak stared at the tactical display. In 30 minutes of combat, he had lost 8 of his 12 dreadnoughts and dozens of support ships. The unknown enemy had not taken a single hit in return. "What are they?" he whispered. His question was answered when Captain Nick Foster opened a communication channel. Sorthak found himself looking at a being that resembled the mythical humans from old stories. The creature was pale-skinned with dark hair and blue eyes that seemed to burn with inner fire. "War Commander Sorthak," Nick said in perfect Vorthak. "I am Captain Nick Foster of the Terran Colonial Navy. You have attacked innocent civilians. Surrender now and your remaining ships will be spared." Sorthak felt terror creep into his heart. Humans were supposed to be extinct, vanished from the galaxy centuries ago. Yet here was one of them, commanding technology that made Vorthak dreadnoughts look like primitive toys. "Impossible," Sorthak hissed. "Humans are myths. Stories for younglings," Nick smiled coldly. "We were never myths, War Commander. We were simply waiting for the right moment to return. That moment is now." The Valiant reappeared directly in front of the Bone Crusher, its forward weapons charged with energy that made space itself ripple. Sorthak realized he was looking at his own death. "This is your final warning," Nick said. "Surrender or be destroyed." Sorthak looked around his bridge at the terrified faces of his crew. His mighty fleet lay in ruins around him, destroyed by a single human ship. The legends had been true after all. For the first time in his military career, War Commander Sorthak surrendered. The dimensional rift that appeared above the Federation capital world was unlike anything anyone had ever seen. Space itself seemed to tear open like fabric, revealing a darkness that pulsed with strange energy. Then the ships began to emerge. President Carl Hughes stood on the observation deck of his government building and watched in awe as the Terran fleet materialized from the void. The ships were massive, each one larger than the biggest Federation vessels, but they moved with the grace of living creatures. Their hulls were dark metal that seemed to absorb light, and they bristled with weapons that defied conventional design. "How many are there?" asked his aide, Dr. Patricia Lewis. "The defense grid counts over 400 vessels," replied General Roy Parker, who had joined them to witness the historic moment. "Admiral, this fleet could conquer the entire Federation without breaking a sweat." The flagship was largest of all, a kilometer-long behemoth that dwarfed everything around it. Along its hull, barely visible markings read, TCS Liberty. On its bridge, Admiral Grace Bennett studied the Federation capital through her view screen and felt a mixture of sadness and hope. 3 centuries, she said to her executive officer, Commander Sarah Phillips. 300 years since humans walked openly in this galaxy. "Are you ready for this, Admiral?" Sarah asked. Grace nodded. "Signal the Federation government. Tell them President Hughes requests permission to address their council." Within hours, the most important meeting in galactic history was taking place. The Federation Council chamber had been hastily modified to accommodate the human delegation. President Carl Hughes walked to the podium and looked out at representatives from dozens of worlds, all staring at him with mixtures of wonder and fear. "Distinguished delegates," Carl began. "I am President Carl Hughes of the Terran Colonial Authority. We are the descendants of the humans who left this galaxy over 3 centuries ago. We have returned because our galaxy is in danger." The chamber erupted in voices speaking dozens of languages. The Zephyrian ambassador clicked his mandibles in agitation. The Vorthak representative, one of the few who had not fled after Sorthak's defeat, hissed in what might have been fear or anger. "Order," called the Federation Chancellor. "Let the human president speak." Carl waited for silence before continuing. "We did not leave because we were defeated. We left because we nearly destroyed everything in our war against the forces of chaos. The weapons we used 3 centuries ago could have sterilized entire star systems. We chose exile rather than risk such destruction again." He gestured to Admiral Grace Bennett, who stepped forward. Grace was a veteran of countless battles during humanity's exile, and her presence commanded immediate respect. Admiral Bennett will explain our military situation, Carl said. Grace activated a holographic display that showed the current positions of all Vorthak forces. The precision and detail of the intelligence shocked everyone in the chamber. For 3 centuries we have been watching and preparing, Grace said. We know the location of every Vorthak base, every supply depot, every hidden weapons facility. More importantly, we know about their ultimate weapon. The display changed to show a massive space station hidden in the Vorthak home system. The structure was the size of a small moon and bristled with equipment that radiated menace even through the hologram. The Star Killer, Grace continued, a weapon capable of destabilizing the core of any star within 50 light-years. The Vorthak Emperor plans to use it if their conventional invasion fails. One activation could destroy every inhabited system in Federation space. The chamber fell silent. The scale of the threat was beyond anything they had imagined. However, Grace said with a slight smile, they do not know that we know about it, and they certainly do not know that we have developed countermeasures. Fleet Admiral Ryan Cooper stepped forward. Ryan was younger than Grace but had spent his entire career preparing for this war. The Terran fleet is ready to begin liberation operations immediately. We propose a joint task force with Federation vessels providing local knowledge, while Terran ships handle combat operations. The Vorthak representative stood up shakily. What guarantee do we have that humans will not simply conquer us all once the Vorthak threat is eliminated? Carl looked at the alien with compassion. Because conquest was never our goal. We could have returned at any time during the past 3 centuries with overwhelming force. Instead, we chose to watch and protect from the shadows. We are not here to rule. We are here to ensure that no species suffers the fate we barely avoided ourselves. The vote to accept the human alliance was unanimous. Within days, Joint Federation Terran task forces were launching liberation missions across the Outer Rim. Commander Sarah Phillips led the first major operation, the liberation of the mining world Kepler Prime. Her flagship, the TCS Defender, worked alongside Federation cruisers in a carefully coordinated assault. Federation vessels, take positions around the orbital stations, Sarah commanded. Terran units will handle the surface installations. The Vorthak defenders of Kepler Prime had expected another conventional attack. Instead, they faced an enemy that could phase in and out of normal space at will. Terran Marines, led by Colonel Matt Johnson, appeared inside heavily fortified bunkers without warning. Lieutenant Kelly Brooks, now serving as a liaison officer aboard the TCS Defender, watched the battle unfold with professional admiration. The Terran troops moved with inhuman precision, their armor adapting to enemy weapons in real time and their tactics flowing like water around obstacles. How are they so effective? Asked Captain Jake Morrison, who had requested assignment to the Joint Task Force after his discovery of the human ruins. 3 centuries of preparation, Kelly replied. Every human child learns military tactics before they learn to read. Every civilian trains for combat service. They turned their entire civilization into a military force designed for one purpose: protecting others from threats they cannot handle alone. The liberation of Kepler Prime took 6 hours. The Vorthak garrison, which had held the world for months against Federation attacks, surrendered without destroying the civilian population. Colonel Matt Johnson's ground forces had neutralized every weapon emplacement without causing significant collateral damage. As reports of successful liberation operations poured in from across the rim, the Vorthak Emperor made a decision that would force the final confrontation. In his palace on the homeworld, Vorthak Prime studied reports of human capabilities and realized that conventional warfare was useless. Activate the Star Killer, he ordered his generals. If we cannot have this galaxy, no one will. Admiral Grace Bennett received the intelligence report aboard the TCS Liberty as her fleet prepared for the final assault on the Vorthak home system. The enemy was preparing to use their ultimate weapon, just as human planners had predicted. Signal all ships, Grace ordered. Operation Final Dawn is authorized. It is time to end this war forever. The Terran Dreadnought fleet, humanity's most powerful warships, began emerging from dimensional space around the Vorthak homeworld. The final battle was about to begin. The Vorthak home system had never seen a fleet like the one that emerged from dimensional space around their homeworld. Admiral Grace Bennett stood on the bridge of the TCS Defiance, the most powerful ship humanity had ever built, and watched as her dreadnought fleet took positions around the enemy planet. The Terran ships were massive beyond belief. each one carrying weapons that could reshape reality itself. The TCS Defiance alone was 2 kilometers long and bristled with gravitational manipulators that could bend space and time. Alongside it came the TCS Vengeance, the TCS Thunder, and dozens of other vessels that represented 3 centuries of human military evolution. "Status report," Grace ordered. Commander Sarah Phillips checked her displays. "All ships in position, Admiral. The Starkiller station is powering up its primary weapon. Dr. Patricia Lewis estimates we have maybe 20 minutes before it can fire." Grace nodded grimly. The massive weapon platform orbiting the Vorthak homeworld was already glowing with deadly energy. If it fired, it would destabilize the system's star and kill everything within 50 light-years, including the approaching Terran fleet. "Signal all Federation vessels to maintain safe distance," Grace commanded. "This is going to get dangerous." Captain Jake Morrison watched from the bridge of his Federation cruiser as the human dreadnoughts moved into attack formation. He had seen what a single Terran destroyer could do to an entire Vorthak battle group. Now he was witnessing the deployment of humanity's ultimate military force. "My God," whispered Lieutenant Amy Watson, who served as his tactical officer. "Look at the size of those ships." The TCS Defiance was easily 10 times larger than any Federation vessel, but it moved with impossible grace. Its hull seemed to ripple as dimensional drives activated, allowing it to exist in multiple realities simultaneously. On the Starkiller station, Vorthak Prime himself supervised the weapon's activation. The Emperor was ancient, even by Vorthak standards, and he had ruled through strength and fear for over 2 centuries. Now facing the return of the legendary humans, he prepared to destroy everything rather than admit defeat. "How long until the weapon is ready?" he demanded. 15 minutes, my Emperor," replied the chief engineer. "The stellar destabilizer requires precise calibration to ensure the chain reaction spreads to all nearby systems." Vorthak Prime studied the tactical display showing the human fleet. "Impressive ships, but they cannot survive the death of a star. Today, we take the entire galaxy with us into oblivion." Admiral Grace Bennett had other plans. "Begin Operation Stellar Shield," she ordered. "All gravitational manipulators online." The Terran dreadnoughts spread out in a precise formation around the Vorthak star. Each ship activated weapons that could manipulate gravity on a massive scale. Space itself began to warp as the human vessels created an artificial gravitational field around the entire solar system. Dr. Patricia Lewis, monitoring the operation from the science vessel TCS Discovery, watched in amazement as her instruments detected the formation of what could only be described as a pocket dimension. "Admiral, the gravitational matrix is stable. We have successfully isolated this system from normal space." "Excellent," Grace replied. "Even if the Starkiller succeeds in destabilizing the star, the explosion will be contained within our artificial boundary. The rest of the galaxy will be safe." But Grace had no intention of letting the Vorthak weapon fire at all. Captain Alex Turner, now commanding a squadron of assault ships, led the attack on the Starkiller station itself. His vessels phased through the station's defensive shields as if they did not exist and began systematically destroying the weapon's control systems. "Target the power cores," Alex ordered his pilots. "We need to shut down that weapon before it can fire." The battle around the Starkiller was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Human ships appeared and disappeared at will, striking with weapons that ignored conventional defenses. Quantum torpedoes phased through armor to explode inside enemy hulls, while particle beams cut through the strongest materials like they were paper. Colonel Matt Johnson led Terran Marines in a direct assault on the station's control center. His troops moved through the facility like ghosts, their armor adapting to every weapon the Vorthak defenders could bring to bear. Within minutes, they had reached the central command chamber, where Vorthak Prime himself waited. "Impossible," the Emperor hissed as human soldiers materialized around him. "You cannot be here. My station is impregnable." Matt removed his helmet, revealing the face that had haunted Vorthak nightmares for centuries. "Nothing is impregnable to humans who fight for something greater than themselves," he said simply. On the bridge of the TCS Defiance, Grace watched as her forces systematically dismantled the Vorthak defenses. The enemy had fought bravely, but they were using weapons designed for conventional warfare against an enemy that had transcended such limitations. "Admiral," reported Sarah Phillips, "Colonel Johnson has secured the Star Killer Control Center. The weapon has been permanently disabled." Grace felt a weight lift from her shoulders. The greatest threat to galactic civilization had been neutralized. "Signal all Vorthak forces. Offer them terms of surrender." The response came not from the military commanders, but from Vorthak Prime himself. The ancient Emperor appeared on the main screen, flanked by Colonel Johnson's Marines. "I am Vorthak. Prime, Emperor of the Vorthak Empire," he said with dignity despite his defeat. "I surrender my forces unconditionally to the Terran fleet. We ask only that our civilian population be spared." Grace studied the alien leader with respect. Even in defeat, he showed concern for his people. "Emperor, your civilians have nothing to fear from us. We are not conquerors. We are protectors." The formal surrender ceremony took place on the TCS Liberty 3 days later. Representatives from the Federation, the Vorthak Empire, and dozens of other species gathered to witness the end of the greatest war in galactic history. President Carl Hughes stood before the assembled delegates and outlined humanity's vision for the future. "We propose the creation of the Terran Protectorate, an organization dedicated to preventing conflicts like this from ever happening again, not through conquest or domination, but through strength that deters aggression and protects the innocent." Captain Jake Morrison, now promoted to admiral and serving as liaison between the Federation and Terran forces, watched as species after species agreed to join the new galactic alliance. The humans had kept their promise. They had returned not as conquerors but as guardians. 6 months later, Admiral Alex Turner stood in the courtyard of the Luna Training Academy, watching recruits from dozens of worlds learn human combat tactics. Young Vorthak, Zephyrians, and Federation citizens trained side by side, preparing to defend their galaxy against whatever threats might emerge from the vast darkness between the stars. "The legends were true after all," said Lieutenant Kelly Brooks, who now served as an instructor at the academy. Alex smiled as he watched a young Vorthak cadet successfully complete an advanced tactical simulation under the guidance of a human sergeant. "No, Kelly. The legends were just the beginning. The real story is what we build together from here." Above them, the stars shone peacefully in the night sky, watched over by the silent guardians who had once been called myths, but had become the galaxy's greatest hope for lasting peace.